You're invited to explore one of the greatest little towns in the American Northwest. The community of Fort Benton, Montana, welcomes you to soak in our history, enjoy our Western hospitality, and launch out from here on other great adventures. The Fort Benton area has been a centerpiece for the American West and frontier history since the first white man set foot here more than 200 years ago. In Fort Benton, you'll find yourself shoulder to shoulder with history you can literally reach out and touch. Tucked into the Missouri River Valley, Fort Benton is the authentic small western town. It has remarkable sights, but it's not a tourist trap. Fort Benton is, as many visitors have commented, an undiscovered jewel, genuine and friendly. And Fort Benton is the perfect starting point for other great adventures, the crossroad for historic trails and boundless recreation. Fort Benton is steeped in America's legacy of Western exploration and settlement, beginning with the Lewis and Clark expedition that first passed through the area in June 1805. A key juncture on that journey, Decision Point, where the captains correctly chose their Missouri River route, is just a short distance from Fort Benton. And the town hosts Montana's official Lewis and Clark Memorial, erected in 1976. The fort was originally constructed in 1846 as the last of the fur trading posts along the Missouri. Fort Benton is the oldest continuously occupied settlement in the state, giving it preeminence as the birthplace of Montana. Its first years were also the halcyon days of the fur and buffalo robe trade with the Native Americans of the northern plains. And Fort Benton, constructed at a natural ford of the Missouri River, was the center for that trade, from tribes both to the north and south. The oldest building in Montana is the original blockhouse at the site of the old fort. Much more of the adobe and log fort has been carefully reconstructed. Here you can stride through the main gate into a world of Native Americans, voyagers, and traders more than a century and a half ago. Even as the fur trade diminished in the 1850s and 60s, gold strikes in Montana territory brought in floods of hopeful miners and adventurers. The gold rush began at almost the same time the first steamboats came upriver to Fort Benton, the head of navigation on the Missouri. The first steamboat arrival in 1860 ushered in a 30-year era as the world's innermost port. Massive tons of supplies came upstream for further distribution by Murphy wagon and bull whacker to far-flung outposts, and huge fortunes in gold, furs, and buffalo robes were returned to the east. Today, the beautiful Fort Benton steamboat levee and riverwalk is studded with reminders of the city's heyday. These were turbulent times, with ruffians, gunslingers, and outlaws that gave rise to Fort Benton's reputation as having the bloodiest block in the West, and roiled further by Indian wars, such as the flight of the Nez Perce, and Chief Joseph's famous surrender speech in 1877, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." You can see the rifle he held over his head when he said those words at the Missouri Breaks Interpretive Center in Fort Benton. Indian treaties, reservations, and the near extermination of the buffalo were part and parcel of the next era, opening the Great Plains to cattle and sheep, to cowboys and herders. A sad but powerful reminder of that time is the Hornaday buffalo display at Fort Benton's Agricultural Center. Naturalist and taxidermist William Hornaday gathered the 6 wild Montana buffalo in 1886 for display at the Smithsonian National Museum in Washington, D.C. Today, returned to their homeland, they are the only original examples still in existence of the 60 million or more wild buffalo that once roamed America's Great Plains. Fort Benton's evolution from trading post to wild and largely lawless river port to headquarters for merchant princes who controlled a vast mercantile and banking empire, to far-flung outposts across the Northwest and Canada, to opening of the rangeland, are all captured at Fort Benton's Museum of the Upper Missouri. The coming of the railroad through north-central Montana in the 1880s ended the steamboat era, dashed Fort Benton's commercial supremacy, and silenced its self-proclaimed title as the Chicago of the Plains. But the railroad was also vital to the next big influx after the turn of the last century, the homesteaders. In the first 2 decades of the 20th century, free land, combined with benevolent crop-growing conditions, lured to the plains thousands of citizens and European immigrants. Then the drought came. The skies dried, the crops died, and most of those thousands moved on, leaving behind failed banks, abandoned homes, and the very hardiest to eke through the coming depression. But Fort Benton again survived, and today the city's Museum of the Northern Great Plains, the Montana State Agricultural Museum, and its accompanying Homestead Village recapture that era and trace the agricultural advances that finally cast the region as the heart of the Golden Triangle, now among the top wheat and barley producing areas on the North American continent. Agriculture and ranching drive Fort Benton's economy today. It's also the seat of government for Choteau County. That's an area of nearly 4,000 square miles. To put it in perspective, this single county is as large as the U.S. states of Delaware and Rhode Island combined. But with less than 6,000 total residents, Choteau County's population trails a bit behind those states' nearly 2 million people. In short, this is an area where the land still overwhelms, where the big sky was never bigger, where a person can drive a couple of miles out of town past herds of deer and antelope, get out and stretch, and hear nothing. Total, complete silence, except perhaps the rustle of the wind, the call of a meadowlark, or screech of a hawk. Back in town, you might call it a sleepy little river town. Everybody knows everybody, and even if we don't know you, we'll wave, we'll stop and chat, we'll tell you stories, and boast about our great little town. We're awfully proud of our place on the National Historic Register, with our National Historic Landmark status and selection as a Preserve America city. We'll make you feel welcome at our 7 eateries, 7 bars, or 7 churches, at local stores where many of the gifts, sundries, jewelry, notions, arts, and crafts are locally made. You're welcome at the weekly farmers market in the summer, and you're welcome at town festivities, like our annual summer celebration the last weekend of June, with its fun run, parades, good food, good music, and dancing. And oh, by the way, it's been dubbed the best tourism event in Montana. Our Choteau County Fair takes place here the 3rd weekend of every August, with its genuine rural, country, and western flair. And you're certainly welcome to soak in the story of the world's most faithful dog, Shep, who during the depths of the Great Depression kept vigil at the Fort Benton train depot for more than 5 years, awaiting his master who could never return. Those interested in architecture might enjoy Fort Benton's many historic structures, like St. Paul's, one of the oldest masonry buildings in Montana and the state's oldest Episcopal church. Or the Choteau County Courthouse, 2nd oldest still operating in Montana. Or the Carnegie Library, Montana's oldest county library. The Grand Union Hotel opened in 1882 as the finest hotel between St. Louis and Seattle, now lovingly restored. Or the Old Bridge, the first bridge to span the Missouri River in Montana, and today a superb place to stroll and soak in the levee, the cottonwoods, the town and river scenery. Or the many homes and businesses, humble to elegant, that have added to our town over the past 160 plus years. Now, these are not exactly the great cathedrals and palaces of Europe, but they are monuments in their own right to our immigrant forebears, to grit and determination, to success and to heartbreak, to the sheer endurance that was needed to build a true community on America's frontier. And finally, Fort Benton is the crossroads and jumping-off point for other great adventures. As a major supply terminus through much of the late 1800s, it's no surprise that the town is the origin of historic trails, such as the Mullen Road that connected with pioneers as far away as Walla Walla, Washington, the International Old Forts Trail north and east to Canadian outposts, and the western part of the Old Forts Trail, known more notoriously as the Whoop Up Trail, that brought supplies, including rot-gut liquor, to the Canadian outback, and spurred formation of the Northwest Mounted Police, among others. Other trails are less obvious. Fort Benton is centrally located near a number of great birding habitats and viewing sites. Choteau and surrounding counties' wide open and sparsely traveled highways draw motorcyclists to freewheeling road trips through God's country. And, perhaps most spectacular, Fort Benton is the gateway to the Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument. Downstream from Fort Benton, nearly 150 smooth-flowing, wild and scenic river miles to raft, canoe, or kayak through the incredible white cliffs, past Indian petroglyphs, abandoned homesteads, breathtaking scenery and wildlife, much of the landscape little changed since Lewis and Clark first described its beauty more than 200 years ago. Launch your own unforgettable journey of discovery with a visit to the Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument Interpretive Center, which highlights the natural and cultural history of the 375,000-acre corridor. River experts, outfitters, guides, and shuttle agencies serving Fort Benton support voyages ranging from less than a day to a week or more in length, and from basic needs to high luxury. Whether you visit for a few hours or spend your vacation with us, you'll find Fort Benton and the surrounding area provide what many discriminating visitors to the West are looking for: a relaxed, romantic, and authentic experience off the beaten path where history, hospitality, and leisure intersect. Come see Fort Benton for the history, stay and enjoy our hospitality, and launch out on great adventures beginning at the birthplace of Montana.